Implementation overview for Microsoft Reading Progress for MFL. How we set up the evaluation. So the evaluation is set up in your school for you to identify 2 similar ability Key Stage 3 classes of the same year group. You then use the trial wizard to allocate 1 class to the intervention and 1 class to the control. The pre-test task is then set up using the reading progress for both the classes to be able to do the reading task and use this as a baseline for the program. The intervention group then continues with reading progress for the duration of the trial, and your control class just continues as usual with the normal homework or tasks that they would have. And then both groups go back onto reading progress to complete the original reading task that had been set for the pre-test, and then that's used as your post-assessment measure. There's no marking involved. It's all marked by the Microsoft Reading Progress software. So planning. The first task is to identify 2 similar ability Key Stage 3 classes to participate in the evaluation from the same year group. Step 2. Identify a text that we will use as the pre- and post-assessment task on reading progress. Please note this task must be challenging enough for the students to complete, because the last thing you want to be able to do is set a task that's too easy where all the students complete without any errors. And step 3, using the trial wizard on What Word Teacher platform, randomly assign a class to the intervention and the control. So you put your class title in the name, and then you put the number of students for each class so that it can populate the data spreadsheet for you. Implementation. Next is to assign the pre-assessment reading task to both the intervention and control groups. So record the data for the mispronunciations in the Excel tracker, located in the resource folder, and then input this into the pre-test on the trial wizard. If you're unsure where to download the data in a CVS file, just go to the training resource, which is included in the resource folder. It basically goes through where you can find this in the Microsoft training to access the CSV. Step 5. For the intervention class, assign weekly reading tasks using reading progress and monitor the usage. The control class will continue with business as usual for the duration of the trial. And finally, step 6, assign the post-assessment reading task. This is the same text that you set for the pre to both the intervention and the control group. Record the data for the mispronunciations in the Excel tracker and then input this into the post-test data on the trial wizard. Please note that on the trial wizard, you're unable to input the data until the week before the end of your trial. We include a tracking spreadsheet. You'll find this in your downloadable resource folder, which allows you to be able to link an anonymized student learner ID to a student in your class for our system. So it just means that all data that's entered onto What Word Teachers is anonymized. At What Worked, we run a pilot with the school. So here's just a very quick interview with the teacher after the pilot, explaining how it went.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Thank you so much for running the pilot evaluation in your school. And I've just got 3 questions that I'm going to ask to go through on this video. But if you could just make a quick introduction, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Tom Harmon. I am the head of French at the Royal Grammar School in Newcastle. Alongside French, I also teach Spanish.
Fantastic. So the first question I've got is, why did you decide to test reading progress?
So when I first came across Reading Progress, I thought it would be an excellent way to try and bring more speaking activities to students, especially away from the classroom. We'd come out of the pandemic and a lot of classroom time had been lost where students hadn't had that opportunity to speak the language out loud. And I thought it was a great way to visualize a student's development and progress whilst speaking.
Fantastic. And then the second question is it possible just to briefly explain how you set the trial up within your 2 classes, if that's okay?
Yep, sure. So I had 2 classes in Year 8 for Spanish, both mixed ability, similar number of students. The plan was that we had a text at the beginning of a unit of work, which both classes completed as a homework. And then for the duration of the unit, which ended up being around 8 weeks, the test group completed one homework per week, doing a reading progress task. And at the end, both groups did the same task they did at the start of the test, to see what the level of progress had been across the two groups, to see how reading progress could augment or serve as a learning accelerator for students.
Fantastic, and it was great that the results came back, and it showed that it had a positive impact on the students. But the last question is, do you have any advice for any other teachers who will be replicating, hopefully, the evaluation? So, is there any lessons learned that you had when you piloted this within your school?
Absolutely. I think it's really important straight away to decide what you're going to deem to be a mispronunciation and perhaps what's going to be deemed an omission and insertion. For me, I went, for example, with the word me and may. If they were mispronounced, it was actually an omission and they included the incorrect word. I think it's really useful to make good use of the insights feature to see trends across the class and then look to design a text that includes some of those areas that the class is really struggling with, so you can see maximum impact over the course of the trial. Finally, I would always, as with anything with IT, I would always check it yourself once the student has completed the work, to give yourself knowledge of what's going on and just to see if there's any kinks that still need ironing out, as they are working monthly to try and improve it, but there's always still one or two things to be checking on.
Fantastic, and that's it. So thank you very much for your time in taking part in the pilot in your school.
No worries.
So when implementing reading progress, it's important with any intervention just to think through logistical issues that you may have. So the first one is time. So how much time will you expect the learners to read for using reading progress? And then the intensity. Will you be setting this as once a week homework or twice a week? Location. Is this set as a homework task or is it in a specific lesson time? And then access. If students do have issues accessing reading progress at home, is the ability for them to access this through school, maybe in library or somewhere that they can do this. Reminders. It's important just while the trial's running, just to monitor the completion rates and just to remind students who've not completed the homework. And then finally, for resources, if it's delivered in school, are the IT resources available, such as the headsets? And just remember that if it is delivered in school, you can use the AI noise cancelling software that's included in reading progress. So logistical barriers are common in any intervention delivered in schools, so it's important to consider these prior to starting. So moving on to the assessment, the outcome measure is attainment as defined by reading by the number of mispronunciations identified on the assessment, reading task, and reading progress. So for the assessment task, as I've already mentioned, please make sure this is selected at a challenging level for the students to complete. And as both the control and intervention groups receive the same assessment, familiarity with this will not introduce bias to the effect size. And finally, just some assessment guidance. This can be completed either as a homework task or in school. Ensure that the reading task is challenging. Make sure you record your pre and post assessment scores on tracking spreadsheet, and then add the anonymized data into the WhatWork platform at the relevant stage of the evaluation. So the next steps, please make sure you download the protocol. If you download the resource folder, and then you can move on to the trial wizard.